So, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of potential and the way that we talk about that to each other in our current society and familial structures and economic structure, etc. And I have had someone recently, and really many people in my adulthood and since my childhood, but especially in my adulthood, since I haven't gone a traditional route with my career or trajectory, say to me, oh, I just have so much potential. I have so much potential. And if only I could just, do something to meet it. And I really have to choose a path to follow where what's implied is that I will achieve some sort of title or position of prestige, like being, a lawyer or a doctor or something of the sort, and making a bunch of money, essentially something that can then be used to prove that I have met my potential and made my potential and not had so much potential go to waste. And an interesting metaphor that recently popped right into my head when someone was saying this to me, and it's all the more tender, right? Because I feel that in myself. I definitely have that fear, or am more than willing to have that be something that I'm open to feeling in myself. Like, I'm terrified of not reaching my potential, or that I'm somehow wasting the gifts or abilities that have been given to me, and that there's some larger form of service that I could do that would be of greater benefit to myself and others, etc. And so I'm absolutely open again to that being a real possibility or a real potential, that I'm not meeting my potential. That being said, the last time that someone said that to me, of like, that I'm one of the smartest, most capable, blah, 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 blah people they've ever met, and I just have so much potential and just so much potential, but I'm not meeting it in the way that people in our society, or at this point in time, or especially people of older generations, tend to measure it, which is, again, basically how much money are you making and how impressive is your career to say to other people. Or also perhaps in the case of women, how many children do you have, or being married, or things like that. So I have none of those outer world validations to show for having reached my potential. And there's also, in a society that worships youth and becoming successful in those measures early on, I think that we all, whether consciously or unconsciously, live by a narrative that if we don't become successful or reach our potential, whatever that means, by a certain age, that we've failed and we will never have another chance, because everyone knows that that has to be reached in your 20s or 30s, and it's all really downhill from there, instead of ideas of longevity and sustainability, and perhaps being at our peak when we're in our 50s or 60s, should we be fortunate enough to live that long. Anyway, the metaphor that immediately came to mind when this person told me that I just have so much wasted potential, and essentially I'm a waste of potential. They didn't say that, but that was what was implied, unless I do something with this to make money, basically, and prove myself. Was what would this person and I also have different ideas when it comes to land and what is valuable when it comes to a piece of land. Whereas for me, and a lot of what I've learned, or just my own relationship with the land, I see ecological diversity, and land that has had less harvested from it, less just man-made interaction with it in a lot of ways, as very valuable. It's easy for me to see that land tends to be more sustainable in its diversity. It seems to have more species that are there, of whether it's trees or grasses or shrubs. It also seems to, for instance, not become muddy as easily. There are more root systems. It absorbs water. It has seemingly from my observations and understandings and relationships with it, less invasive species or stickers. Like, it's easier to walk barefoot on. For instance, it's much easier to walk barefoot like out on an undisturbed prairie or forest floor than it is on any kind of ground that's been disturbed. There tend to be what we would call weeds, but things with stickers and burrs, and the stalks of cut grass or plants are very difficult to walk barefoot on, whereas land that has not been disturbed for a long time or never been disturbed tends to be very soft, which was something that surprised me once I started walking barefoot. But anyway, I thought, okay, so this person would say the same thing that they're saying to me to a big tract of prairie that has never been tilled to become something that could be irrigated and grow something, or to a forest that has never had lumber cut. It's really, in a lot of ways, that capitalistic way of looking at something and saying, oh, that just has so much potential, so I need to go cut it down and do all these things with it to control it, that will also then require a lot more time and care to keep doing those things, rather than letting that land continue to sustain itself on its own with very little effort. So this is the same idea of looking at a tract of wild land and saying, oh, that's just wasted potential. We have to do something with it to make money and prove that, we're harvesting its potential. And it hurts, or it definitely touches a nerve, and perhaps again because there's some truth to it, but to have someone say to me that I haven't reached my potential and have just wasted all this potential. But when I think of it, like, the same person would look at a piece of wild land and say that same thing, it feels a little bit more validating to the path that I've chose, which is more focused on sustainability and longevity and presence and even diversity, in my own interests and my own experiences, in my own thoughts and visions and imaginings and explorations in both the inner and the outer world, that had I chosen a different trajectory up to this point that would have led to more titles and money, I would certainly not have anywhere as great of a variability or diversity in experiences, relationships, places, etc. So it was just something that kind of made me laugh to think about, because I put more value in land that has been allowed to remain wild and have more diversity than a field that makes a bunch of money. And while I know that many people would argue, well, that's how we feed people, maybe part of it is also just that there's a temperance, there's a balance. And if the whole world were plowed down to be fields that grew things cultivated by man's hand and made money, then we would be in trouble. And so, not to say that there's anything wrong with some agriculture in fields, just as there's nothing wrong with people who do follow those more traditional paths that equal money and prestige and titles and great services that at this point in time the world needs. We also need there to be wild, uncultivated land, and perhaps the value of those things, just like the value of a less traditional life like mine, is a lot harder to measure. It's a lot of it is even just like felt, I mean, the experience of being on wild land is very, very different, whether vibrationally or energetically or even just emotionally felt sense, than being out in the middle of a monocrop field. And it was also just ironic, right? It feels a bit ironic when people say things like that to me, because they can't, sometimes it seems, feel that the value of what I have cultivated is in my very presence of being, and being someone that they trust and feel at ease with and can talk to and listen to and have deep conversations with. And that part of the gift that I bring to the world, or the way that my potential expresses itself, is in my ability to truly be with whoever I'm with, rather than being distracted by the demands of some high-powered, big money-making job, in which case I probably wouldn't have much time for many conversations like I have with those people. So yeah, just if you feel like you haven't reached your potential, I just invite you, or people have straight up told you that, as they seem to feel invited to say to me, even though I haven't asked, to maybe consider that if all of us were living by that capitalistic notion that the only way to reach potential is to do something that's going to gain a lot of credibility in the current materialistic, capitalistic, progress, quote unquote, obsessed system, that is the very same paradigm and outlook that is raising our earth to the ground, and that there has to be some kind of balance. And for some of us, the potential that we have might express itself in a way that cannot easily be measured or recognized, perhaps at all, by this society. And I, for one, am very interested in and very passionate about certain things, whether it be the earth or animals or people being allowed to have more space and freedom to express themselves naturally and have diversity, instead of just being pressed really hard for output and things that can be harvested and turned into money. So that was a story that I wanted to share. I shared that metaphor with my cousin the other night, and he liked it, so I thought I would make a video about it. Cheers.